Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday morning. We are writing a novel, okay, of going through the Bible as story, because we've mentioned earlier that the Bible is really one continuous story written over 1,500 years by 40 different authors. But amazingly and miraculously, we see one story flowing throughout that entire book, or books, whatever we want to speak of it as. But, one of the important things that in any novel is, you could come to the idyllic setting that we looked at yesterday in the first chapter of our novel and say, well, that's good. That's the end of the story. But any story has complications to the plot. And when we come to the third chapter of Genesis, the second chapter in our book that we're writing here, we find a complication to the plot. Now, one of the things that happens is we immediately meet a fourth character. Now, the Bible describes the fourth character as the serpent, and it doesn't really reveal a lot about this character, other than a serpent, and he's very deceptive. And really, he is the foil. He's the enemy in this plot. And he comes onto the scene, and if we're reading the Bible, we want to, hiss and boo and throw peanuts at him from the gallery. But this is the villain in the story who comes to destroy this idyllic and beautiful setting, this beautiful relationship between God as the main character and man, or male and female, as the supporting characters in this story. And so what does the enemy do? He comes and he says, God gave you dominion. But you know what? You shouldn't have to take orders from that guy who created you. You should be able to make your own decisions, because that's what dominion means. And so the whole account of how they act upon their own. They forget that they were created as dependent beings rather than an independent being like God. And so they sinned. And once sin enters the picture, the plot becomes much more complicated. And they suffer the consequences of what we call the fall. And then the plot is complicated further in the next chapters of Genesis, because eventually we see that there are heavenly beings, and they come and they have offspring with the daughters of man, it says, and man becomes even further rebellious. And it says they become totally wicked. So the sin of Adam and Eve that began there spread through the death and in the action of the killing of Cain, or the killing of Abel by his brother Cain. Now it spreads through all society by Genesis 6, and we have the whole event of the flood. That means that sin has spread throughout all of creation. Once that flood is over, we move to Genesis chapter 11, and there we see that man is saying, we ought to be in charge. And so the rebellion spreads in chapter 11 to all of mankind. So we see really three aspects of the complication of this plot in the fall, the flood, and in the Tower of Babel. Now, at this point then, in this second chapter, we're seeing a lot of complications in our story. We have been introduced to the villain, and he's really bad, okay? And as we look at that, we say, how is God going to get out of that? Well, we're going to look at that a little bit tomorrow. I think I can say that, okay? But I hope you'll join me, because the plot thickens right here, okay, in the second chapter of our novel. So see you tomorrow, and we will push on with creating our little novel, okay, or our big novel. Bye for now. God bless.